Have you heard of the Gucci family before? Gucci. No? Mamma mia. So yes, today we have House of Gucci, which I can never just say like a normal human being ever again because of this movie. In a year full of films that are dramatic retellings of actual like non-fictitious people, but told in a dramatic way to communicate their family history or a portion of their life story, this is just another one. It's just been a year of that, funny enough, but if you haven't heard of it, House of Gucci came out this year in 2021, and it is, I think he only had 2 this year, but it's Ridley Scott's second film in terms of directing. So, I mean, I'll throw his face up there because I'm just going right into it, aren't I? Yes, Ridley Scott directed this. Previously covered on this channel from his film I saw probably, what has it been now, like a month, 2 months ago? But he just did The Last Duel, which bombed at the box office, and his recent comments as to why it's bombed have just dug his grave deeper. But the thing about that is that I'm going into this film to review the film, not review him as a person or his character or what he has said in interviews or has not said or anything like that. We're separating the art from the artist here, kind of. I'm just going to judge the film by itself. So I'll be honest, I wasn't sure what House of Gucci was about going into it. The trailers were like, yes, it's the Gucci family, and it's about the name and the clothing line and an assassination plot, and that's pretty much it. Again, I went into this not knowing a thing about the subject matter because I don't really give a shit about designer clothing. I don't. Like, I've never owned a Gucci belt or those weird, like, gold with the black shoe with the gold thing on. Like, I get the appeal of designer clothing, but I don't know if it's because I wasn't exposed to it growing up or because I never was given it or could afford to buy it throughout most of my life. So I've never, like, I don't care. So I never bothered to research the history of Gucci. But this movie kind of was my entry into that, and I'm sure some creative liberties were taken to make things spicy and dramatic, but let's get into it. As I said, House of Gucci was directed by Ridley Scott. All you gotta know is the man either does sci-fi or period pieces, meaning he's the man who brought us Alien back in the day, but he's also the man that brought us something like Gladiator back in the day. So I think nowadays I really wish he would get back to like making great sci-fi, because Prometheus and Covenant, while I enjoyed them, were kind of disappointing in their own right. But that being said, I would love to see more sci-fi from him if he got back to his roots there. When it comes to period pieces, I would say I enjoyed both House of Gucci and Last Duel about the same, but for different reasons. In terms of the cast, I mean, I could go over every single person that's in the Gucci family, but the 2 main ones of note, like the 2, like, arguably the 2 leads in this film are, once again, covered before on the channel, Adam Driver, which, I mean, I tell you, he's adorable in this movie. Or he's just, I don't know, he plays different characters very well. He's a very good actor, and he can play the broad spectrum of hero, villain, in between, and all that. He kills it. And then the person who absolutely, for me, steals the show, and I swear to God, every time I see her in something, I forget how talented she is, and I forget how absolutely drop-dead gorgeous this woman is. But Lady Gaga is in it too, as the woman who marries into the Gucci family. And yeah, she eats it up. She eats up every single scene. And when I tell you, man, I said it once, I'll say it again, I forget how attractive this woman is, and how, like, I don't want to use a term like seductive necessarily, but I mean, she could if she wanted. She can step on me for all I care. I'm just saying, good. The 2 of them, power couple, like, at least for the sake of the casting. And granted, there's other big names in this film too, but those are the main ones you're here to see. And the rest you can research on your own time, though I will say, it's worth bringing up Jared Leto's character. What is it, Paulo Gucci? Jared, I don't know what it is about you and your fetish for playing weird fucking at people, but I'm here for it. He does a really good job. with the character he's given, you know what? It's almost redemptive enough for me to forget about his Joker, but not quite. So overall, I really enjoyed the movie. I have a few notes on pros and cons, but I don't have a lot of notes. If we're going down the usual checklists and all that, I mean, it was well directed, it was well shot. Cinematography was on point. It had that film feel while also being like 4K. It wasn't crisp, if you know what I mean, but it had just enough, like, everything looked great, but at the same time, it felt like I was still watching a film. I don't know, it's hard to put that part into words. It was interesting though, because this film does what I've seen other films do, and that's, there's a lot of different colors in this film, but everything's kind of muted. Not necessarily grayscale per se, or like sepia tone or anything, but there's some black and white bits here and there, a very few. But for the most part, the film is just kind of muted, varied color palettes, and it's pleasing to watch. I looked it up with one of my friends, and this movie cost. All right, first of all, watching this movie, I knew, like, oh my god, so much money. For one, it's a long film. For two, all the locations, all the high-end sports cars, the vintage high-end sports cars, all the clothing. I assume that some of the clothing and jewelry has to be real. I'm sure a lot of it's fake, but locations, where they go, what they do, the people, the places. This look, when you're watching it, you're like, damn, how much did it cost to get this made? $75 million. That's how much it costs to get this made. Is it the most expensive film out there? Heavens no, but $75 million is a hell of a budget for a film. So the film looks expensive and feels expensive, which I suppose is suiting because it's about Gucci, so ironically enough, that kind of makes sense. Performances are all killer, like I said. Gaga and Driver definitely are standouts, but the rest of the main cast, as well as all the supporting cast, no weak points, no holdout, nothing to bring that down. It was very well cast and it was very well acted. There were comedic moments, there were dramatic moments, there were sad moments, but the most important thing was you have two actors who are portraying both a marriage and a union at the height of its marriage and romance and at the worst of it, and they both were able to display and portray both aspects of that relationship flawlessly, and like you 100% believed it. They were so cute when they were together, and then things get kind of rough towards the end, and then you're like, ugh, this is like Wolf of Wall Street all over again. Which honestly, this film does kind of give, the best way I described it after seeing it, I leaned over to my friend now, and I basically said, this is Wolf of Wall Street meets Game of Thrones, pretty much. Minus the bloody sword fights. It's a good narrative. I was very engaged throughout. It was well balanced and well paced, but at the same time, it could have been a tiny bit shorter, I feel. I don't know if it was because some scenes dragged on or some scenes didn't need to happen or be shown, but I felt like the film could have still done what it set out to do and been a tiny bit shorter, maybe just a few minutes. For something I didn't care about, it did a good job of getting me interested in the narrative and the actual, plot, and wondering what was going to happen next. Honestly, the only cons that I really have, so yeah, the movie could have been a bit shorter. Toward the end, there's when the storyline involving the hitman kind of like comes into play and all that, like, it's handled all right, but it kind of feels, I don't know if sloppy is the right word, but it kind of like happens pretty quickly, and I don't know, I felt like it could have just been either shined up a bit, spruced up a little bit. There could have been it could have been either shown differently or handled differently. Not to say that it was handled poorly, but just something felt off about that section of movie. Honestly, I don't have a lot of bad things to say about it. It's a movie that I'll probably buy when it comes out and watch again, kind of like The Last Duel. Again, they're both fantastic movies in their own rights, and the fact that even as I was making notes and right now, as I'm trying to go over it in my head, I'm really struggling to think of any negative comments to say about the movie. Now, I know that there's been some articles, and I haven't read them because I didn't want it to interfere with my opinion, but there have been some articles, of course, from the Gucci family just basically shredding the movie apart and being like, how we didn't want to relive this is a very sensitive subject for us, how could you bring this to light, it was vastly inaccurate. And it's like, look, you can tell from the movie, and if apparently from what the public said, is that the Gucci family has always been dysfunctional. Enough to the point where, as the movie says at the end, no spoilers here, it's just how it is, the Gucci name is no longer associated with the Gucci family, which to me is hilarious. It's still a name, a very well-known, well-recognized name, and people still buy it and flaunt it and all that, but the Gucci family, they've all either been bought out, died, or fucked off somewhere. Gucci is no longer associated with the family from whence it came. So that should tell you everything you need to know about like how dysfunctional this family is in contrast to its brand. Like I said, I don't have a lot to say. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it more than I thought I would, and I'm kind of glad I did because the trailers made it seem to be one way. I wasn't really sure what to expect going into it, but I don't know. It was just like a nice story. Well, it was a good, engaging story, pretty dramatic and kind of anxiety-inducing here and there. It was well written, it was well written, and henceforth, because it was well written, it was then subsequently well acted. And yeah, it just looks expensive. As you're watching the movie, you're like, I guarantee you the thought will pervade your mind at least once, just like, oh, this movie looks expensive. All that being said, I'm going to alter what I thought I was going to rate it a little bit, out of all fairness and going based off my own, like, usual scorecard here. But I would give House of Gucci probably a high 4 out of 5. It's not perfect, but high 4 out of 5, yeah. It's not perfect, but it's, by my scale, pretty close to it. I don't think it's like only a centimeter or two from perfection, but I think it's a very well done film, worth your time if you're into that sort of thing. It's good to watch for the performances, for the movie itself. It's entertaining, it's well shot, directed, cinematography's there. I think it did a good job, in my opinion, of showing me the story of a family name and design brand and all this that I didn't know about before. I'm sure there's more to the real story, but for the sake of this dramatic retelling, it feels like it just succeeded on all fronts. For me, it didn't feel perfect. It wasn't quite like 100% my kind of movie, but I'm still very much here for it. I look forward to seeing it again. I just can't in all good consciousness give it a 5 out of 5 because there were some critiques I had here and there. But I'll leave it at that. As always, thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for the next episode of whatever movie that I review. Goodbye, travelers.